You're listening to Always Pneumatic, Never Static, the totally pressurized podcast brought to you by Bulk Transit, where we keep the lines clear, the tanks empty, and the conversation anything but dry. Whether you're running powder, pellets, or anything in between, pull up a seat, crack the windows, and let's hit it.
Welcome to the third episode of Always Pneumatic, Never Static, brought to you by your Bulk Transit. We're so excited to be able to deliver a little something to our crew, something that connects us even though we're spread across multiple states. Our aim with this show is, to bring you some good old trucking entertainment, but also we're looking to bring our team closer together, share safety tips, and keep you up to date on our trucking industry. We're kicking things off this week with a bit of a history lesson. Many people never consider the genesis of bulk freight transit, but the trail between the days of shoveling things to sophisticated transportation of today is as long as it is storied. That sound right there? That's the sound of innovation. A pneumatic trailer unloading 25 tons of product in about 90 minutes, operated by one driver. Wait. Before you reach for the next button, consider this. You're hauling bulk. That means you're living it pretty much daily. Think about what that would mean for you if none of these innovations had ever been made. You'd be breaking your back loading and unloading. There'd be a smaller window of time that you'd physically be able to do the job. Not to mention the filth of it all. Bulk haulers, y'all get dirty now, but just think of the game if you were doing the job manually. Imagine with me, if you will, it's 1925. You're at a rail yard, and there's a boxcar full of 40,000 pounds of flour that needs to be unloaded. How long do you think that takes? Just take a guess. About 8 hours. And that's not with one, but 6 people on the job by hand into bags, which then get loaded onto trucks or wagons to be delivered to their next destination by the guys who just did all that work. Sounds like more than a few gnarly calluses to me. Today, the same amount of flour gets blown from a pneumatic trailer into a storage silo in about 90 minutes. And that's with one driver pushing buttons instead of 6 laboring over a pile. That's not just progress, that's complete revolution in how we move the materials that build our world and feed our families. So buckle up. In this episode, we're going on a journey from the early days of rail freight through the trucking revolution to the pneumatic breakthrough that changed everything. Along the way, we're going to take a peek at how these changes affected entire industries, shaped where factories could be built, how and what products were available to customers, and what it truly meant and still means to be a bulk hauler. This is the story of bulk freight, and trust me, it's a lot more interesting than you might think. Part 1, the rail dominance era. We're setting the stage. It's late 1800s, early 1900s. If you needed to move bulk materials, and I'm talking cement, grain, flour, sand, coal, chemicals, a lot of the same stuff we haul at bulk, you had basically one option, and that was the railroad. Now, railroads back in the day were incredible for their time. They could move massive quantities of materials across vast distances, an unheard of feat in any other capacity. But when it came to bulk materials, the system was, let's just say, far from perfect. Starting out, most bulk freight moved in standard boxcars. Imagine a regular boxcar, chock full of 100-pound sacks of flour or cement or what have you. When that car arrived at its destination, every single one of those sacks had to be manually unloaded. We're talking about dozens of workers sweating in dust and dirt, moving thousands of pounds by hand. Shout out to them, but that wouldn't be me. The railroads eventually developed covered hopper cars. You've probably seen the modern versions riding the rails. These were revolutionary for grain and other bulk product. You could load from the top, unload from the bottom, and gravity did the work. But even so, these had serious limitations. The first problem, contamination. Bulk materials were exposed to the elements during loading and unloading. Rain, dirt, debris, it could all end up in your product. For food-grade materials like flour and sugar, that was a major problem. All right, the second problem, product loss. Every time you handled bulk material, you lost some. It stuck to containers, it blew away in the wind, or spilled during transfer. These little losses added up to big money. The third problem, labor costs. Moving bulk freight was, as you've heard, brutal and labor-intensive, needing a swath of workers at every load and unload point. These weren't skilled laborers. Oh no, often day laborers, just people who needed the money, doing dangerous, dirty work for minimal pay. But here's the biggest problem of it all: flexibility, or rather, the complete lack of it. See, if you were shipping by rail, you were completely tied to wherever the rail lines went. Your manufacturing plant had to be near a rail line. Your customer's facility had to be near a rail line. And you were on the railroad schedule, not your own. This created what logistics people call the last mile problem. Even if rail got your product 500 miles across the country, you still needed to get it from the rail yard to the final destination. That meant transferring the cargo to horse-drawn wagons and later, trucks. Each transfer meant more handling and product loss, more time, more labor, more cost, and more risk of contamination. And here's a real-world example. Let's say you're a cement plant in Pennsylvania in 1920, and you've got a customer building a bridge in rural Ohio. The cement goes from your plant to a rail car, rides the rails to the nearest junction, gets transferred to another car for a branch line, arrives at the closest rail depot to the construction site, which might still be 30 miles away, and then has to be loaded onto wagons or trucks for that final journey. Every single one of those transfers is time, labor, and money, and everyone is a chance for contamination or loss. As you can imagine, the system affected entire industries. Bulk processing plants like cement factories, flour mills, chemical manufacturers, they had to locate near major rail lines. This meant industrial development was geographically concentrated. You couldn't just build a plant where the market was, or where labor was the cheapest, or where raw materials were the most abundant. You built where the railroad went. And for consumers, this meant certain products were expensive or downright unavailable in areas poorly served by the railways. Fresh cement had a shelf life, and so did certain chemicals and food products. If you couldn't get it there fast enough by rail, you weren't getting it there at all. The rail era of bulk freight was as powerful and expansive as it was rigid, expensive, and inefficient. The industry was desperate for a better way. Part 2. The Trucking Revolution. The early 1900s brought us the internal combustion engine and the first motorized trucks. At first, these advances were pretty primitive. Think converted wagon chassis engines, super hard rubber tires, maybe capable of 15 to 20 miles per hour on a good road. But immediately, truckers and engineers saw the potential. If you could put a reliable engine on wheels, you could deliver directly to customers who'd been previously underserved. No rail yards, no transfers, door to door. The first bulk haulers were basically dump trucks with covers. Simple gravity dumps that all could handle sand, gravel, and the like. For the finer products like flour or cement, you'd see the box trucks where the product was still in bags, just like the old rail days, but now with the flexibility to drive anywhere, right to the customers that needed it most. Advantages of this method were immediate and obvious. A truck could take that load of cement from the Pennsylvania plant directly to the Ohio construction site. One vehicle, one driver, no transfers. Jobs that used to take days could be done in mere hours. But, and this is important, those early bulk trucks still had the same labor problem. When you arrived at the destination, you were still unloading by hand. Maybe you had a gravity dump that made things easier for construction materials, but for contained products, still shoveling, still bagging, still labor intensive. And early trucks had their own limitations. Road infrastructure in the 1920s and 30s was beyond terrible outside of cities. Trucks moved slow. Weight restrictions were severe. And if you had to move really large quantities, rail was still much more economical. Enter 1956, the year everything changed. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. President Eisenhower's Interstate Highway System. This wasn't just about building roads for family vacations. This was about freight being transported reliably coast to coast. This was about fundamentally reshaping American logistics. Listen to this. The official purpose of the interstate system included, quote, to meet the requirements of the national defense in time of war and serve the needs of a growing peacetime economy, end quote. Freight was built into the DNA of the interstate system from day one. For bulk haulers, this was a monumental game changer. Suddenly, you had smooth, high-speed freeways connecting every major city and industrial region in America. Weight limits increased, travel times dropped, reliability shot through the roof. A cement plant didn't need to be solely in Pittsburgh or Cleveland anymore. You could build in smaller cities with lower costs, good highway access, and proximity to raw materials. Then you'd be able to truck your product anywhere in the region or the country efficiently and economically. Industries decentralized, competition increased, prices came down, product availability went up. A win for all, especially the trucking industry, which exploded. By the 1960s and 70s, trucks were carrying more ton miles of freight than railroads for the first time in history. The shift was seismic. For bulk haulers, there was still a problem, though: unloading. Your truck could be the fastest, you could be riding the smoothest highway, and have the most direct route. But when you arrived at the customer, you were still dealing with gravity dumps, manual shovels, or mechanical augers and conveyors that were slow, messy, and required constant maintenance. The industry needed something better, something faster, something cleaner, something that could handle everything from food-grade flour to industrial fly ash without contamination. The industry needed, yeah, you guessed it, pneumatics. Part 3. The pneumatic breakthrough. The 1960s and early 70s brought the trucking boom and commercial development of pneumatic bulk trailers. For drivers, this was the innovation that created the modern bulk hauling industry as we know it today. The concept is, you could say, elegant. Use compressed air to blow or vacuum bulk materials through hoses directly from the trailer into storage silos or containers. No shovels, no augers, no sweaty workers, no mess. Just air pressure and physics. Now, the basic technology had been around for a while. Pneumatic conveyors had been used in stationary applications for decades. But putting that system on a mobile trailer, making it reliable, and getting it adopted by the industry, well, that took some time. Early adopters were industries dealing with high-value or highly sensitive materials. One of the first was the plastics industry. In late 1960, plastic pellets were becoming a huge industrial product, the raw material for everything from bottles to car parts to toys. Pellets needed to stay clean and dry. Contamination meant ruined batches costing thousands of dollars. Some companies tried shipping pellets in boxcars with manual unloading. Total nightmare. Too much contamination. Others tried bag-and-box systems, which were expensive and still labor-intensive. Pneumatic trailers solved the problem. The system was sealed, the product was clean, and the unloading was fast. Once the plastics industry proved the concept, other industries started paying attention. Cement companies, flour mills, feed manufacturers, chemical producers, anyone dealing with dry bulk materials saw the potential. But there was resistance, as there often is with new technology. New trailers were expensive, more than twice the cost of a standard dump or box trailer. The system seemed complicated to operate. There were concerns about reliability. What if the compressor fails in the middle of unloading? What if the system clogs? Early pneumatic systems had problems. Compressors broke down, hoses ruptured, filters clogged, and there was a pretty steep learning curve for drivers and for receiving facilities. But the advantages were way too compelling. Let's talk numbers. A crew of workers could unload about 20 tons of bagged cement from a truck in maybe 4 to 6 hours. A pneumatic system could unload 25 tons in about 90 minutes. One driver, push a button. That's not just faster, that's a complete transformation of the economics. Labor costs slashed. Product contamination virtually eliminated. Product loss cut to almost nothing. Worker safety dramatically improved. No more workers breathing dust or risking injury from repetitive heavy lifting. By the 1980s, pneumatic trailers had become the industry standard for dry bulk transport. If you were moving powder, pellets, granules, or any free-flowing dry material in significant quantities, you were doing it, most likely, using pneumatics. Today's pneumatic trailers are incredibly sophisticated compared to earlier models. You've got trailers specifically designed for food-grade products with stainless steel tanks and sanitary fittings. You've got trailers for hazardous materials with all the required safety systems. And you've got high-capacity trailers that can carry 50,000 pounds or more. Modern compressor systems are reliable and efficient. Filtration systems prevent contamination in either direction, which protects both product and the environment. Control systems let drivers monitor pressure, flow rates, and completion status. And the regulatory environment has evolved too. Food-grade haulers have to meet strict FDA requirements. Hazmat haulers need special certifications. There are cleaning protocols, inspection schedules, maintenance requirements, all to prevent the kind of contamination that was more possible without pneumatics. Being a pneumatic bulk hauler today isn't just about having a CDL and knowing how to drive. You're operating sophisticated equipment. You're managing product integrity. You're following complex regulatory requirements. This is highly skilled and valuable professional work. Part 4. How transport shaped industries. Okay, we've talked about the technology behind pneumatics, but let's talk about impact, because the evolution from rail to truck to pneumatic didn't just change how we moved stuff, it changed what got made, where it got made, how much it cost, and what was available to consumers. Let me give you some examples. Construction. In the early days, if you were building something that required cement or ready-mix concrete, you were limited to locations near rail lines or cement plants. Large construction projects in remote areas were incredibly expensive because of transportation costs. The interstate system and pneumatic bulk hauling changed all of that. Suddenly, cement and fly ash could be economically transported hundreds of miles and unloaded quickly at job sites. This enabled construction booms in suburban and rural areas. It made large infrastructure projects more economically viable. Another one? Plastics manufacturing. This is huge. The explosion of plastic products from the 70s onward was partially enabled by efficient bulk transport of plastic pellets. Before pneumatic trailers, contamination and handling costs made plastics more expensive. Efficient pneumatic transport helped bring costs down, which accelerated adoptions of plastics across industries. Every plastic bottle, container, toy, or car part you see, those things started as pellets and probably traveled in a pneumatic trailer. The animal feed industry. Modern livestock operations depend on bulk feed delivery. Before pneumatic systems, farms either produced their own feed or received it in bags. Pneumatic bulk delivery made specialized, nutritionally optimized feed more easily available to farms in regions further from the railways. This contributed to the industrialization of agriculture. I guess for better or worse, depending on your perspective. But the point is, the logistics enabled the transformation. Food, like flour, sugar, powdered milk, cocoa, spices, processing, all of these are dry ingredients that go into processed foods. Pneumatic bulk transport made it economical for food manufacturers to source ingredients from specialized suppliers rather than producing everything in-house, bringing prices down. This made the modern food processing industry possible with its complex supply chains and specialized production. And here's something that changed that doesn't really occur to us today. Industrial location freedom. Before efficient trucking and pneumatic transport, bulk material processors had to be near rail lines. This created industrial corridors along major rail routes. Cities like Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland became the manufacturing powerhouses partly because of rail access. Once trucking and pneumatics matured, that geographical constraint disappeared. You could build a cement plant in rural Georgia, a plastics facility in small-town Wisconsin, a flour mill in Kansas, and efficiently serve customers anywhere in the region. This had huge economic implications. Smaller cities could attract industrial investment. Labor costs and real estate costs came down for manufacturers not forced to locate in expensive industrial cities. Competition increased as new players could enter markets without massive infrastructure investments. The Interstate Highway Act is often credited with enabling suburban sprawl and the rise of big box retail, but it's also enabled industrial decentralization and the modern logistics economy. And pneumatic bulk transport? Well, that was a key piece of the puzzle. Part 5. the human element. Let's get to the people who lived through these changes. This wasn't just about technology and industrial growth. It was about real human jobs and working conditions. In the rail and early trucking era, bulk freight handling was backbreaking labor. Literally, you were shoveling, lifting, carrying heavy bags. You worked in clouds of dust, breathing in and absorbing cement dust, flour dust, chemical dust, you name it. Respiratory problems were common. Back injuries were an epidemic. That's just scratching the surface of the on-the-job issues that came with early bulk hauls. The work was often seasonal and unstable. When freight was moving, you had work and lots of it. When it slowed down, you didn't. You had none at all. With the advent of pneumatic systems, the job changed fundamentally and for the better. Suddenly, you weren't a manual laborer, you were a proud and skilled technician. You needed to understand the pneumatic system, operate it safely, troubleshoot problems. You needed to understand product handling, contamination prevention, and regulatory compliance. The pay got better because the skill level required went up. The work became steadier because efficient pneumatic haulers were in demand year-round, and the safety improved dramatically. I'm not going to romanticize this. The transition wasn't easy for everyone. Lots of workers lost jobs when companies switched from manual handling to pneumatics. Not everyone was able to make the jump from laborer to equipment operator. And the early days of pneumatic hauling had their own dangers that worried workers. Air compressors could explode. Pressurized systems could fail. There were new types of accidents. But overall, the arc of progress in bulk handling has been towards safer, more skilled, better compensated work. And that's something worth recognizing. Today, if you're a professional pneumatic bulk hauler, like those of you listening, you're part of a specialized community. That's right. Not only have you got your Class A CDL, a specialized community in its own right, but you're also loaded up with hazmat and tanker endorsements. To do your job, you understand the products you're hauling, their properties, their hazards, their regulatory requirements. You know how to operate complex pneumatic systems safely and efficiently. You understand cleaning and contamination prevention. You can troubleshoot mechanical and pneumatic problems on the road. This is skilled, professional work, and you are part of the club. So let's bring this all together. Starting off in the rail era, bulk freight was slow, labor-intensive, expensive, and constrained by proximity to railways. Moving bulk material meant shoveling, bagging, transferring, and just accepting significant product loss and contamination. The trucking revolution, introduced in part by the Federal Highway Act, brought flexibility and direct delivery, but still struggled with labor and the mess of unloading. And then, pneumatic systems changed everything. Fast, clean, efficient, versatile, safe. This was all possible with pneumatics. One driver, one trailer. It was wildly more efficient. This evolution enabled industrial development in more parts of the country, made products cheaper and more widely available, created entire new industries, and transformed bulk hauling from unskilled manual labor into specialized professional work. Every time you see a construction site, a plastics manufacturing plant, a feed mill, a food processing facility, think about how the materials got there. Chances are excellent they came in a pneumatic bulk trailer delivered by a professional driver like you. Someone who's part of this incredible and niche industry. Until next time, keep the shiny side up, the rubber side down, and remember, you're not just hauling freight. You're part of the evolution of an industry. Catch you later, driver.
And that's all she blows for today's episode of Always Pneumatic, Never Static, your number one and probably only pneumatic trucking podcast, brought to you by Bulk Transit. Thanks for rolling with us today. Till next time, stay safe, keep those lines clear, and keep it pumping.